On this episode of Inside Engineering, we trek over to Lakeland, Florida to talk with Brett Berube and Tom Pride from our Tampa office about some real serious problems, namely bats, and how they make sure bats are safely and effectively excluded from project sites before work begins. Also, if you haven't yet subscribed to the show, do it now if you like the content that we're putting out. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube, Stitcher, more. Do it. Subscribe. Inside Engineering starts right now. Inside Engineering. Untold stories and fascinating people from the world of civil engineering. This is episode 22, recorded in February 2020. Bat Exclusions and Natural Resources with Brett Berube and Tom Pride. Inside Engineering is an RK&K podcast. Learn more at rkk.com/podcast. And welcome back to another episode of Inside Engineering. We are once again not in Baltimore. This is part of our South Florida road trip. We are in Lakeland. This isn't really South Florida.
Central Florida.
Central Florida. Yeah, I see. Yeah. I'm not going to start over. But I screwed up already. That's okay. You guys are a forgiving bunch, right?
We're from Tampa, and the university there is South Florida University.
Oh, okay.
South
So
Florida,
we're good. So welcome back to another episode of Inside Engineering. Part of our Florida tour. We started in South Florida. We're now more in Central Florida in our Lakeland office. And with me today are Tom Pride, sitting here to my left. Tom, thank you for joining us.
You bet.
We're glad you could make it. And on the end, Brett Berube. Brett, thanks for taking the time out also.
No problem.
You have an injury to your foot, so I'm glad we got you a chair.
Yep. Better than a stool.
Do you want to tell the story?
It was just a softball injury. Sprained an ankle.
I feel your pain. I have a bad ankle. I step on a sidewalk crack, and anyway, nobody wants to hear this. They want to get to the stuff that we're here to talk about. Today, we're going to first let Tom and Brett sort of talk about what they do, and then we're going to get into an interesting project that has something to do with bats, and you guys are going to break it down for us. But Tom, why don't we first start by you telling us what you do here at RK&K, and then you can throw it over to Brett, and you guys can segue and sort of talk about
as long as it's not a softball.
It is not. No softball. No throwing softball. No softball today.
Sure. Well, yeah. Thanks for having us here today. Awful glad to be here. So Brad and I both are all things natural resources here in Florida. My background is biology. From Tennessee. I grew up in the temperate hardwoods and the mountains up there, but 26 years ago or so, I transplanted to Florida like a lot of other folks have. And I've been doing sort of a jack of all trades ever since then down here, everything from seagrass and coastal type issues, marshes, mitigation, impact assessments to upland Florida. Florida has a lot of different types of habitats, upland habitats, and we do a lot of work in that too. And permitting, do a lot of permitting for our clients, chiefly transportation and a smattering of other types of commercial type clients, utilities, pipelines, that sort of thing. Do a lot of NEPA work, again, for all client types there. Here in Florida, they're called PD&Es, the NEPA phase, but we do those assessments and generally just have a lot of fun doing it. So a lot of folks in the company are very familiar with Pete Stafford up in Raleigh, so we like to think we're the Pete Stafford of Florida. So
nice. We had Pete on a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we know Pete well and certainly appreciate working with him. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, Brett.
Well, I think Tom did a pretty good job of summarizing everything that we do. So I guess I'll start. I have a background in animal biology, focusing in evolution and physiology. From the University of South Florida, born and raised, still live in Florida, Tampa area. I do pretty much whatever Tom doesn't want to do.
Which is in July and August, pretty much anything outside.
That's known as delegation.
Yep, exactly. And I do more GIS stuff, and not just for natural resources, but for cultural resources, historic, engineering, pretty much anyone in our Lakeland and Tampa offices that needs something done in the world of GIS.
Nice. Very good. All right. So we're going to talk about a bat exclusion project. So, I mean, we had Ryan Lieberher on back a couple months ago, and he talked, a little bit about bats and what he does with that. And we talked a little bit about exclusion, but I think this is going to be exciting because we're really going to get to look at a specific project and how it was handled. So maybe if we look at it, maybe give us an overview of it, and then we can talk about the kind of the challenge that there was and how we came away with a solution.
Excellent.
Does that work?
Excellent. Sure. Yeah, that's great.
You guys can tag team it however you want to throw it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Throw it back and forth.
Because that's what it's all about here.
Yeah.
What was it, about a year ago? We got a call from District 1 at the DOT.
A little more than a year ago, because it was late November of 2018.
That's right. They asked if we did bat exclusions, and without blinking an eye, I said sure, thinking it might have been a culvert or something. They had a couple of bats in. Well, it turned out to be the 2,000-foot long Longboat Pass Bridge, which is the bridge between Anna Marie Island
and Longboat Key.
And Longboat Key
okay, so
right over
just a small bridge.
Just a small bridge. It's a bascule bridge, a drawbridge.
Okay.
Very old bridge in the coastal environment, a lot of corrosion, and they're always having to do a lot of repairs on it.
Right.
And the long story short, there's a colony of free-tailed bats living in the bridge. And the free-tailed bat is the most common bat in North America. A lot of people have heard about the bats in Texas and living in the bridges and Bracken Cave there. It's the same species here. And they're very common throughout the southern U.S. especially, and they, for whatever reason, love to take up residence in the expansion joints of bridges. Not every bridge has bats, but they seem to have a few favorites, or actually several favorites, and this one being one of them. They have a lot of repairs that, this is February 2020, that are going on right now, started a few months ago, and before they could start those repairs, the bats that were living in the bridge needed to be excluded from the bridge so that they would not come to harm during the hardcore rehabilitation work that's going on. And there's state laws here in Florida. Just about every state has laws protecting these bats. They're not listed. As I said, they're very common, but nevertheless, you can't just go out and wipe them out and, incidental take, as it's called, or take of the species. So we try to protect the wildlife here in Florida as best we can, and so following the rules with respect to exclusion is the rules we play by, and I'll let Brett talk a little bit about the technicalities of what we did and how we did it.
Sure, yeah, we're going to get into that already.
Yeah.
All right, well, the exclusion seems like a simple enough process. The idea is you install these devices, and FWC, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, has several methodologies that they reference from national and state bat groups, and pretty much they all come down to using a tube or some sort of plastic to put into a crevice that bats are inhabiting that they can get out of, but they can't crawl back up because it's too smooth. And you put them at such an angle so that they can't army crawl their way back up. And then in the rest of the gap, you put some sort of mesh or expanding foam to keep them from getting into other places where you don't have the tubes. So it seemed like it was pretty simple, but most of those methodologies are designed for buildings or houses. So we had to adapt it for a bridge with concrete expansion joints.
So what about a house would make it easier to do that on?
Well, your house, it's a lot easier to affix something to wood than it is to concrete. Our plan was to go out there and just hold them in place with caulk, which normally would stick to wood or a block house.
Something that wouldn't necessarily do damage that you could later remove once the bats are excluded.
Right.
I see. Okay.
So what we had to be the most adaptive with was how to fix these tubes into place and have them secure enough that the bats wouldn't be able to just push them off
without screwing them into the concrete.
Exactly.
Correct.
Okay.
And we were very quick early in the project to reach out to Ryan up in Harrisburg, Ryan Lieber, who's done a lot of bat work, as we know, and we actually invited him down for a few days at the beginning of the project, and he helped us think about the best ways to approach this project from a logistical standpoint, how to do it within budget, and protect the public also. There's a public beach right there. We've got a great photo of Ryan up on a ladder, and a lot of sunbathers, just looking up at him. It's
just right there.
It's just right. Wow. It's right there. So we had a lot of fun with Ryan. He taught us a lot on how to approach this thing. We're very thankful to him for that. The working conditions under there, it's very physical. You're laying, literally laying on a bent cap on your back, looking up into these crevices. It's a lot like caving. I'm an old caver from way back. Do a lot of cave exploring and did a lot of bat work when I was in graduate school in Tennessee, Arkansas, and Kentucky. So I was very comfortable with the concept, but I think what was unique about this one was the number of bents that were over water. So you can tell me about the bucket boat.
Yeah, so that was another issue because we figured we can get all the bents over land with a couple ladders, but something else that Ryan helped us out with, I believe, was he told us about this Hark-On bucket boats, and they're basically just a boat with a cherry picker on it. It's got a lift and a basket for a worker to work in, and they have pontoons on them.
I was going to say, stabilization. Yeah,
right. Yeah.
Right.
So and they can straddle the columns under the bent, so that the current won't pull them away. And that was the best way to get to the bents over water because we weren't allowed to use a snooper truck.
Right.
DOT didn't want to close down.
They didn't want to do MOT or anything.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, it was only a 2-lane bridge, and it was the middle of the season for the beach.
Right. Okay. Right. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So you can't shut down traffic on the bridge. So you got to get to it from below, but there's water, and
That's right.
Right.
So the key to this project, and it was highly successful, I believe. The DOT seemed to be very happy with it. I think the key was all the planning that went into it, all the questions we asked, both of Ryan and other folks, and then just properly planning. Steve Young helped us out a lot with the safety aspects. Mm-hmm. We took all the online training for being up on ladders, working from a bucket, that sort of thing.
Working over water.
Working over water, so a zero incident as far as safety goes there, and that's always key. So I think that's number one, and it worked out very well. So many thanks to everyone who helped out with that. The project came in a good bit under budget. We were very pleased with that, as was DOT. And I think we excluded somewhere between 800 and 1,200 bats that were there. So those bats go off and find another home elsewhere, and the bridge is being repaired today. So very successful project.
Sure. How did you know that all the bats had actually been excluded?
Okay, so when we began the project, we got pretty lucky. Lucky. We didn't see any bats in the first few bents we inspected, and we started forming these theories that, they're called the Brazilian and Mexican free-tailed bat. So maybe during the winter months they migrate south to Mexico and Brazil. But we got, I think it was the first day with the bucket boat, and it was the second expansion joint that we checked, and it had probably about 400 bats in it. And
how okay, hold on. Help me here. How big are these bats each?
Oh, they're smaller than these cups.
Okay.
About 2/3 the size of the cup there.
Okay, so
half the size.
4 inches to 3 inches. So okay.
They got a really long tail. They have
long. Okay.
Free-tailed bat.
Free-tailed bat. Okay.
But their body's probably about 2 to 3 inches.
Okay, so hundreds of them, and so there's an expansion. How big is this expansion? I'm trying to figure out the logistics of how that many bats got into one space. Like, how big is there like a cavity up within the space? Or is the joint just wide
No,
enough
it's-
and long enough that many can fit? Or?
Yeah,
The
it's-
latter.
that's
The latter, okay,
Anywhere from
okay.
a half inch on up to an inch and a half, almost 2 inches, they'll fit in quite nicely. It seems to be their preferred. It is possible to have too wide of a joint, and but they
that wasn't the issue. The
that-
issue wasn't that the joints were too wide. It's just that they
Right.
were
Right.
wide enough.
They were
that
the
that's
perfect.
The perfect
Yeah, they keep the
size.
sun out. They keep the rain out.
right.
Sorry. And so they just crammed themselves
they
up
just
into
cram
the,
themselves up in there
across the whole 2 lanes of the. Is that the idea? Like,
Oh, they're in clusters, various
Okay,
places,
okay.
and it's kind of hard to predict exactly where they'll be. But there's certainly a lot of evidence of where they are with the guano and
Right.
the staining, and you can hear them. And,
yeah.
So
Okay. So sorry, I jumped in on your story. So
Right.
you're in
So-
there. You 400 bats.
And we were, and the question was, how did we know that the bats were excluded? Correct.
Right.
Okay, so we installed our exclusion devices on the joints that had the bats in them, and the methodology, or FWC, requires you to wait 4 nights with temperatures not going below 50 degrees. So once we had our devices installed for 4 nights, and temperatures didn't drop,
Right.
we went back with the bucket boat or the ladders or however we needed to access, and we got back on our backs and looked under the joint and checked to see if any of the bats were still in there. And if there were still bats in there, we would install a couple more of our tubes to help. Maybe they couldn't access the one we got that we
Okay.
put in, and then wait another 4 nights. And I believe by the second time that we checked all of our joints, they were all gone.
So you're just checking the joints, but you're looking sort of through the mesh you've installed.
Well, we would pull it all out
You
when we go back.
you take it all down.
just check
just
it out
look it
really
out,
good.
and
Shine
then-
a light. We have a little peeper camera we put up in there, and just see if we see or hear anything.
And if it's clear, then you were leaving the exclusion devices in place.
We would remove all the exclusion devices and we would replace it with either our wire mesh or our expanding foam.
Got it. So you get them all out and then essentially close it off.
Right. Tom likes to say change the locks on them.
Change the locks on them.
Right, right.
While they're-
they come home and
They went out to
the locks
dinner
are
and they come
changed.
back and
Yeah,
that's-
right. Yes.
Okay. Wow. That's all right. So what else about this project kind of stood out to you? Is there anything, was there a part that you enjoyed the most, or I don't know. I feel like I want to know everything about this.
What did we enjoy the most? I think I enjoyed operating the bucket boat. I've never operated a piece of machinery like that, and it was
And he was very good at it.
it was fun to get a handle on it and figure out exactly how you had to move it and the way that it was the boat itself was parked, so how you had to maneuver the basket around the bridge pilings.
Interesting. No, there's a challenge there that's kind of unique to this kind of work. Having to making sure the boat doesn't drift away while somebody's on it and all this stuff. So this is a project where you were trying to exclude bats after a bridge was built. Are bridges? I don't know the answer to this question. So are bridges, when they're now being designed and constructed, are they taking this into consideration in advance? Like in terms of keeping bats, making sure bats don't get into them so that they don't need to be excluded. They're just excluded from the get-go?
Right.
Not really, although they are starting to look at that for other critters like pigeons, because the pigeons and other roosting birds can cause a lot of issues, with bats and or with bridges, the guano and everything. But it's difficult to. I mean, there are things you can do to put in from the get-go to exclude bats, but bats don't inhabit the majority of bridges. They just actually a small fraction of them. So it's not really a problem that needs fixing.
Got it. Okay.
So
sort
it's
of a
just
rare occurrence that just needs to be addressed as it happens.
statistically rare, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's several bridges out there with bats, but it's not a big issue. We are starting a project in a few weeks down for the city of, or excuse me, Sarasota County. There's a bridge down there with a lot of free-tailed bats in it, and they're doing some rehabilitation work on the bridge. Similar story. Not much of the bridge is over water, but they did ask us to if we could develop a way to permanently keep the bats out, and we're working on that. Nothing's permanent. It might last a few years, and so we're kind of putting our brains together, trying to come up with some ideas for a more permanent fix there without affecting the integrity of the bridge.
I was going to say, it's an expansion joint for a reason, right?
It's an expansion joint. It has to expand and contract with the temperatures. So any kind of device has to be worked into that, and then you're looking at expenses and stuff. So again, it's not really a problem that has to be fixed.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
You guys are also working on I'm just going to sort of switch gears here for a second, because unless there's something else about the bats that you want to hit on.
FDOT was the one that recommended us for that Sarasota County bridge. Because
right.
Oh, so you got a reference from FDOT for the project we just talked about in order to do this one in Sarasota County.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And we did it was supposed to be a bat exclusion, but it was just sort of like a bridge inspection. It turned out to be a bridge inspection on another bridge, the Edison Bridge down in Fort Myers.
Right, over the river there. That's even a larger bridge than the Longboat Pass. Brett spent a couple of nights down there in a snooper truck,
Yep.
but there were no bats.
Yeah, we were allowed to close down lanes on that one, but it had to be night work.
Okay.
And FDOT had been told that bats inhabited the bridge, but when we got there, and we were talking about this earlier, the size of the gaps, the size of the expansion joints on that bridge were probably 8 to 12 inches wide. And I noticed it because I did some reconnaissance down there before we started and accepted the job. And there's a northbound bridge and a southbound bridge, and we were working on the northbound bridge. And when I was doing my recon, I drove the southbound bridge and looked at the northbound bridge from the other side, and I could see all the way through all the expansion joints. I'm thinking to myself, man, those are really wide. They let in a lot of light. And I got down there a few nights later, and I could stand up inside of them.
Wow.
And
just too big for the bats.
Right,
it just
pretty
wasn't
much
their
no
cup of tea.
shelter or anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. But that's a valuable service. I mean, we're able to go down there and assure the client that, I say we. As,
Yeah.
But if you ever have an opportunity, I'd love to come down and go with you.
Down
that's it. The buffalo, that's it. No, that's exciting. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have also been doing some stuff with mangrove mitigation. Am I right?
That's correct.
Can you tell? I don't know what that means. You're gonna have to tell me. I know mitigation. I understand mangroves. I get that, but tell me about it.
Right. Several species of mangroves here in Florida and throughout all tropical and subtropical regions of the world, just about. They're a coastal swamp species, estuarine habitats like we have around Tampa Bay. FDOT District 7 has a lot of bridge projects going on right now and coastal roadway projects that every now and then they nick a little bit of mangrove habitat. And, of course, that's protected. It's a wetland type habitat. So that's covered by all the mitigation rules and avoidance and minimization rules under the Clean Water Act and permitting and state and federal permitting. Long story short is they're constantly needing a supply of credits for mitigation of these unavoidable impacts when they occur. The problem is there are no commercial or private mitigation banks in the area that currently have credits for mangroves. So about a year and a half ago, District 7 approached us and said, hey, we need mangrove credits. Go forth and find. So we did. I've done some mitigation projects in the past, mangrove projects in the past, in a former lifetime, and so the permits person at District 7 approached and said, what are your ideas? So Brett and I put our heads together. We scoured the countryside here, or the coastal side, and we came up with some options. And the long story short, the option that was accepted by the DOT is areas within their existing right-of-way that currently have a heavy cover of exotic species, a lot of exotic vegetation down here in Florida, that the DOT and others literally spends millions of dollars on every year trying to eradicate. So we had the idea, if we lower these elevations, excavate these areas because they're right next to the bay, and bring the tide in so that there's a daily tidal fluctuation and get the grades right, get the put the proper plants in there, we can develop a mangrove swamp. And so that's exactly what we've designed. It was important to do it within the DOT right-of-way because acquiring land, going out and buying land to do this type of work is extremely expensive. You can imagine the cost of coastal properties down here.
Sure.
And, developers buy it up whenever they can, and then to, buy it from a developer is just prohibitively expensive. So anywhere in the DOT right-of-way that they can do their own mitigation is preferred. So that's what we did. Joe Bond here out of the Lakeland office was our engineer of record on that, and he was very instrumental in making sure all the engineering was correct and everything. And there's a lot of coordination with the county, the city over there, and of course the DOT. And the final plans were just submitted a few days ago to the DOT, and it's going to construction in June.
Yeah. Shout out to Daniel Vasquez, the designer that gave life to our designs.
Right. He was our CAD operator. So it's quite a, it's like a 78, 79 page construction plan set. So it's no small feat.
Wow.
So.
How long will that take? How long will construction is it planned to take?
We're estimating about 6 months, I believe.
Or 4 to 6 months.
Yeah, 4 to 6 months.
And then how long after that until sort of the ecosystem is thriving?
Yeah.
So
it takes time. At that point, it's pretty much up to God.
Well, yeah. Estimates here. We're looking for estimates.
Right, but to put quantities to that, the mangroves will come in and actually establish themselves naturally. There's very few plantings of mangroves. We do plant a lot of Spartina in there to act as a seed trap or a seed filter. So there's millions of seeds out there from adjacent mangroves. Those seeds get washed in, trapped by the Spartina plantings that we have. They take root. Eventually, they grow up and they overtake the Spartina, and then you've got a mangrove forest. So you're looking at 2 to 3 years for initial establishment of some good coverage of the seedlings, and then probably 8 to 12 years for maturing of the mangroves. The credits, and we worked out a rather unique credit generation method with the Water Management District and the Corps.
You proposed something pretty innovative there.
Yeah.
We finally worked it out.
Yeah, it was really cool where we didn't ask for the credits up front, which is typically the way it's done, but if you do that, you have to apply a risk factor that severely erodes the amount of credits that you get. And we wanted to maximize the potential credit availability to the DOT. So the idea was we're not going to ask for credits until the DOT actually needs them for specific projects. So if the DOT needs credits, let's say 6 years from now for a project, well, those mangroves should be several feet tall by then, and it can be seen that they're nice and healthy. Fingers crossed that they are at that time, and they will be evaluated at that point, and then the value, the ecological value or credit value, will be assigned by the agencies at that time, and theoretically it will be higher because there's less of a risk.
Right, they're already established, therefore the right now there's a risk of them not taking or it not working essentially. Okay,
that's right.
That is an innovative approach. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So in terms of the exotic species that's there now that we're trying to get rid of, is it literally just ripping that all out? How are you ensuring that it's not going to take back over?
They are very much salt and elevation specific. So the species that are there, the main one is Brazilian pepper, followed by Australian pines. Neither can survive inundated with salt water. So you rip them out, you lower the grades to where the tide comes in twice a day, and that assures that they will not be there.
And part of the mitigation plan, FDOT has to maintain the sites in perpetuity, and that'll involve them going out and making sure that no invasives are popping up anywhere.
Got it. And and given that they haven't received their credits yet, it seems even more of an incentive to make sure that it
That's
thrives.
right.
Yeah,
That's right.
That's a good partnership between the client and us. It seems like a good way to do it.
That's right. This project is part of what's called the TB Next project. It's a huge, over $1 billion, well over $1 billion project, multi-year project that is improving the interstate connection system throughout central Tampa area and surrounding areas like St. Pete, Clearwater. So it's pretty exciting.
That is really cool. We also you guys do a lot of stuff with seagrass as well. Am I right?
We do.
I've heard rumors about seagrass. We talked to Pete, a couple weeks ago, and obviously a lot about seagrass and a one specific project, which is still in progress. So we're kind of light on details on some of that. But tell me about seagrass and what you guys do.
A lot of seagrasses here in the Bay Area.
Yep. We've got three species.
Right.
Okay, so there's not even one seagrass. There's multiple kinds of seagrass.
Okay. 3 or 4 species right here in the Bay Area, and it's a huge success story for the Bay. 30 years ago, close to when I moved here, the seagrass coverage was much reduced compared to what it is now. Water quality improvements, especially with improvements in the infrastructure for sewage and wastewater handling in the area. In other words, they're no longer dumping raw sewage every day into the bay like they did 40 years ago, and so seagrass has really rebounded, but it's kind of plateaued. And one of the major threats to seagrasses now, of course, is just development. Well, a lot of permitting rules very much restricts that. But again, the DOT, when they're building a bridge, approaches, causeways, that sort of thing, there are unavoidable impacts to seagrass. So here again, both District 1 and District 7 are continually in need of seagrass mitigation. There are no seagrass mitigation banks currently. There's one in the process of being permitted, but they're always looking for the next source of credits. And it's very problematic to mitigate on a project by project basis. The DOT seagrass mitigation is not easy, and I think Pete up in Raleigh will agree with that. It's very labor intensive. It's very expensive. Nothing about it is cheap. So with that in mind, we look to get the biggest bang for the buck. How much credit per acre, which equates to dollars per credit. And so that's our focus as we look. I've been dealing with seagrass now for close to 30 years, and one of the more cost-effective ways, although still very expensive ways of doing it down here, is filling dredge holes. There's a lot of dredge holes in the Bay Area, places where developers and even the DOT back decades ago dug out these big holes in the bay to use the sediment for fill, upland fill, to raise the elevations for roads and causeways and developments. And if these areas were excavated in areas of really nice seagrass, historical areas. So the idea being, if you fill it back in to the historical elevation and there's immediately adjacent seagrasses, they will naturally recolonize that. And that's been proven successful on several occasions. Again, it's not cheap. It's not a preferred method, but it's sort of the best bang for the buck right now. And that's actually been done not just in the Bay Area, but down in Miami and several other places also. And so we've developed some concepts. Brett and I's gone out and done some surveys, looked at several dredge holes and that sort of thing, and we've got some recommendations that have been made to the DOT. They eventually they'll run with them as far as authorizing the design and eventual construction of them. So it's kind of neat.
How deep are these dredge holes? I mean, on average, I don't know if they vary, but what are we looking at?
Anywhere from 8 to 15 feet deep.
Okay. Yeah. And the grass just won't grow down into
correct.
them. It needs
It's very sunlight sensitive.
Okay. So it has to be a certain distance from the surface of the water.
Right,
is what it prefers to grow. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So once you go down in there, it's too dark. It's not happy.
Right. And these holes, they act as a trap for muck and flocculants, and so it's just all kinds of nasty down there. And the seagrass is it's just not a suitable habitat for them.
Okay. And where do you have to fill that with similar type of sediment? Where are you getting that from? Like, are we like playing the cup game? Like, we're like
That's it,
taking
exactly.
from this hole to fill in this hole?
You have to
Like-
rob Peter to pay Paul.
Right, that's what.
so-
Okay, so you are sort of maybe not taking from as deep from somewhere else.
Well,
but
you
more
don't. Right, you can't excavate it from elsewhere within the bay. That
Okay.
would be a permitting nightmare.
Right. Okay. So
Right,
then.
so it comes from some upland source somewhere. So,
Okay.
and usually the contractor has to find that. So the contractor, when he bids on the job, he's got to know his sources and then somehow get it there via truck or barge or
Okay.
however. So you can see the dollar signs adding
Yeah.
up there.
Absolutely. Wow.
Yeah.
That's it's cool though. I mean, it's like you're putting things back the way they should be.
Well, that's
It's
it. It is a habitat restoration type of project. It is, and it's kind of exciting to see, and especially when they're successful. And you can go onto Google Earth and look at what you've done throughout your career. I did that. I did that. I did that. and we did this. We did this.
Nice.
So
Well, speaking of your career, that was a great segue, by the way. Well done.
that was not
Professional.
planned.
Well done. Tell us about how. Start with you, Tom, and then we'll go to you, Brett. But how you kind of got to where you are in your career.
Oh boy, how did I get?
We've got about 10 minutes.
Okay, I think by never saying no, I take advantage of every opportunity. When I first started in the mid '80s, there was a little bit of a recession going on. The the ecological side of the industry was not what it is today. It wasn't hot, but that buzzword, Superfund sites and hazardous waste, was very hot back then. And somehow I got stuck in the haz waste industry right out of school, and it was not very appealing. I had to wear the Tyvek suit and stand behind a drill rig and count blow counts, but I did it because there was not much else to do. But I sure learned a lot, and I feel a kinship with my geotech brethren now, after having served those years. But that, just staying in it and always volunteering for that next job and never saying no to going someplace, learning something new, meeting new people, I think got me to where I am today, and sort of made me a jack of all trades, so to speak. So
Nice. Yeah, you got a tool belt that's filled with lots of different tools.
yeah.
What's something you wish you had known earlier in your career?
Oh boy, how to listen more attentively. And when you're young, or at least when I was young, I would think I was listening to a client or a coworker, and thinking I immediately knew the answer. Well, as you get older, you realize maybe I should listen a little bit more carefully. And maybe I should think a few moments longer before providing an answer, and coming up with a better answer than I would have just off the cusp. So, take the time to listen well, and take your time in responding.
Nice. That's great. Great advice for anyone listening or watching. Yeah, for good stuff. All right, Brett, you went through a little bit of your education earlier, but tell us how you got to where we are.
So while I was in college, I had an internship at another engineering company over the summer and winter breaks. Got some experience there doing CAD, GIS, field work for other mitigation sites, and some water quality for various rivers throughout Florida. Then when I graduated, I got a job at a company doing gopher tortoise surveys and excavations, and in that experience, I was able to get permitted as a gopher tortoise agent through the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation.
All right, hold on. You're gonna have to explain as a what agent?
So they call themselves gopher tortoise agents. It's
gopher
tortoise.
Gopher tortoise.
Yeah, they're
like literally a gopher, like the animal.
Actually, well, yeah,
Or-
but
and then
it's a
no,
tortoise.
it's
It's a tortoise.
It's a type of tortoise
tortoise.
called the gopher tortoise.
Right. Gopher like the animal, but it's a tortoise.
But it's a tortoise.
It digs holes.
It digs holes.
It's related to the desert tortoise out in
okay.
Texas.
See, I had no idea this animal even existed. Okay. All right. I've learned something. All right. So a gopher. All right. So start that part again then.
Okay. So that experience allowed me to get registered and permitted as a gopher tortoise agent.
Which means?
So the gopher tortoise is a state protected species.
Okay.
And their burrows are particularly protected because they provide habitat to hundreds of other species. And in Florida, you're not allowed to have earth impacts within 25 feet of a burrow.
Ah, okay.
So gopher tortoise agents are people that are permitted who have had either enough experience or training that can identify gopher tortoise burrows, know the survey methodology, and can positively ID one as either potentially occupied or abandoned.
Got it.
And excavate them.
Right, yeah, and then there's two different types of permits for excavation. I have the one for bucket trapping and hand shovel. And then there's another one for mechanical excavation, which is where you're watching someone with an excavator dig out this tortoise.
Got it. Wow. Okay. So that lets you. And are you still?
I'm still. Yes,
still
I still have
tortoise
that
agent?
permit.
Okay. Wow.
And it's funny because it's actually on the FWC's public website. So probably at least once a month I'll get a call from someone in the area because they can see where I live and they see that I'm a gopher tortoise agent. And FWC says, hey, call these people if you have a gopher tortoise. And usually that's just as simple as, well, you can't move the tortoise without paying for it unless you move it to your front lawn. And then you have to have a special reason for needing to move it. Because landowners can move the tortoises. The FWC has recently allowed that. But they can only move it to their front lawn or a fenced area away from where the problem is currently being caused. Like if they're digging underneath their home or if they have a dog that's harassing them.
Interesting. Wow. There's the whole world of gopher tortoises that I did not know existed, and now I know. All right. So, is there anything you wish you'd known earlier in your career?
Well, I'm still pretty early in my career.
Sure.
I wish when I'd started or when I'd been in school that I'd taken more plant or soil classes. I only took one botany class in school. It was only one offered to undergraduates, and I don't think there were any soil classes. Soil, both of those are very important in wetland delineations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would have given me just one more strong tool to use earlier on in my career rather than having to work to build it up throughout my career.
Indeed. Well, so if you're listening or watching now and you have an interest in wetlands, take those soil classes. Absolutely. Well, guys, is there anything we haven't talked about that you guys want to mention real quick before we move into the final segment? You guys are good? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, did you get the thing about the pick of the week? Wow. So it looks like Brett's going to go first while Tom thinks.
Well, okay, here we go. Several years ago, my wife and I went to New Zealand, and if you're an outdoorsy person, if you love the outdoors, your life will not be complete until you go to New Zealand. And that was 13 years ago we went, and we still dream about it. We still think about it. We spent 3 weeks on the South Island, and
I'm imagining it right now in my mind.
Yeah,
the beauty.
I don't know why I just thought of that, but that's the first thing that popped into my head.
That's great.
It's probably not a day goes by that I don't think of New Zealand.
Wow.
And just how wonderful it was. I'm almost scared to go back because how things are. They're never the same the second time. So maybe I just leave the good memories right there. But if you're a natural resource person, save your money, do it.
Nice. That's a great pick. Well done. All right, Brett.
I think I'll stay with the world travel theme.
Absolutely.
When I was in college, I went to South Africa, and
cool.
Because the advisors are always sending out emails like, do this internship and travel the world.
Mm-hmm.
They were very big on international connectivity. So I got one that said work on a great white shark tour boat, and I grew up loving Shark Week and looking forward to that every year. So I saw that and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll make this happen. I went down there for 1 month out of one summer. And, you know, South Africa, it was great. Not just, it was amazing to get into a cage and see these great white sharks that I've only seen on TV or in movies before. Getting to see them up close, you know, they say they're only 3 meters and, you know, it's like 12 feet, but it's still pretty big when you're right in front of them.
I am terrified right now listening to you tell this story.
But yeah, I loved everything about South Africa. The food, when you were in the cities, you could walk everywhere. The places to visit, like we went to vineyards and beer tastings, cheese tastings. Wow. And I made it down to Cape Agulhas, which is the southernmost part of Africa, where you can see the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean.
Wow.
Sweet.
Well, guys, I feel now I'm sort of depressed. You guys, like, now I want to go travel somewhere.
Well, let's do it.
My wife loves to travel, so she would anywhere. She would be on board in a second. So what the? Yeah. All right. Well, that was good. You guys both had good pick. Thank you for coming up with those on the spot.
I'm glad Tom went first.
Yeah, give you a second to think. That was good. That was good. Well, thank you guys both for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun. I think I've learned a lot. So hopefully everyone's learned a lot. And thank you all for watching and listening to another episode. Inside Engineering comes out on Tuesdays. And you can check us out at our home at rkk.com/podcast, where you can stream on demand both audio and video versions of the podcast. Or you can catch us on any podcasting platform where you can subscribe. You can also subscribe, but you can also like, rate, review, do all those things. Also at our website, we have a short survey if you want to give us some feedback. We'd love to hear how we're doing. You can suggest questions that we ask in the future, but we really appreciate you watching and listening, and we'll see you next time on another episode of Inside Engineering.